All right, thank you for staying with the Daybreak. Let's talk about the state of the nation now. Honorable John Ariko Namoit, who's a member of parliament for Turkana South, will be joining us online from Mombasa shortly. Gabriel Muduma, political commentator, will be coming in as well in just a bit. But Duncan Okach, advocate of the High Court, is here with us, which is a good thing because what we're about to start with is actually matters of the High Court and matters of the judiciary. So let's take a look at the front page of the Standard. The deal that earned Rigathi extra millions. Before we even get into the nitty-gritties, Duncan, is this evidence of a broken justice system or evidence that if you're in power, you can get your way?
Trevor, thank you for having me. I think if you look at this, it bespeaks of the broken kind of criminal justice system that we had in terms of the previous regime. And to a large extent, it tells you that there was a possibility of cases or charges being trumped up and go directly through the criminal justice system. And to a large extent, you can even be convicted, but because of political persecution. The sad part of this is that there was an appeal taken to, there was an issue taken to the High Court, and therein it was expected that they will be sifted, the court will sift and realize that this was a political process. But for one reason or another, the court agreed that indeed these funds should be forfeited by Mr. Rigathi Gachagua, then MP. But to a large extent, then it tells you, if you look at the appeal that went to the Court of Appeal, the Asset Recoveries Authorities is telling you, or was telling the Court of Appeal, that there is information we didn't have. And that is the reason why we proceeded the way we proceeded. So to a large extent, at this particular point, with the information now that we have had, we think this money or these funds were properly with Mr. Rigathi Gachagua, now the DP. Ideally, it tells you that it is not right for persons to be taken to court, arrested, taken through this process before investigations are complete. That is actually the essence. Why would we be arresting people, rushing to take them to court, publicizing without finishing the process of investigation? But above all, the main issue here is at the office of the DPP, and I've said it in many other shows. If you look at our constitutional architecture and design, it is structured in a way that even if there are excesses from the police, even if there are pressures which are political to arrest or persecute someone, indeed the DPP has been given independence in terms of his office. And his work is very critical. I call it the sieve mechanism. This is where the DPP ought to look at the allegations brought, juxtapose them with the law in terms of the sections or the provisions that are alleged to be flouted, and decide, having persuaded himself that what is before him is enough and proper to charge someone. But when you find that the DPP today says, I will charge you, tomorrow says, no, I think it was wrong, after you've gone through that process, it bespeaks a whole process in terms of a broken justice system. But fundamentally, what is even sad is when later on the DPP says, I was influenced, there was political influence in my decision to charge. Yet, the same, as much as people are vilifying other people, the same DPP is in office today and in meetings with the president, in meetings with the same deputy president, and no one is seeing anything wrong with that.
So you think the DPP should take blame for all this?
The DPP takes blame, and he has even said, I'm taking blame. But you don't just take blame and continue. Because what happens, Trevor, if he has accepted that I was actually influenced, yet I have all these security for 10 and all these constitutional safeguards, then it lends credence to the critics who then will think, and say, maybe even today these withdrawals and the about-turns are still political machinations, so that if tomorrow there's another regime, the DPP again can do an about turn and say, even that time, I was also politically being pressured. Okay.
Let me bring in Honorable Namoit on this. Namoit is a member of parliament for Turkana South. He's joining us from Mombasa. Does that show that the justice system is broken, or is it evidence of abuse of power? Honorable Namoit, we are talking about...
I can't hear you.
Honorable Namoit, we are talking about the front page of the Standard, where we're talking about the deal that earned Rigathi Gachagua his extra millions. Now the High Court has said that he can get back his 202 million. So the question is that a sign of a broken system or abuse of power?
Good morning, Trevor. I just want to greet the members of the panel, and also to greet the members of my constituency, that is Turkana South. Just to answer your question, that whatever the DV has been awarded, I don't see it appropriate because of what is happening currently. Just by virtue of Gachagua being a deputy president, now that he has been awarded back what the court had taken away from me, it is not in order.
Why not?
They have taken advantage. They have taken advantage of being in government, and that is not right. Because I know if they were not in government, they could not have been he could not have benefited from that award.
But Namoit, there's the flip side where they say that when they were out of government, they were being politically persecuted.
I don't think so. The law must apply equally to all the citizens of Kenya. Because at that time, he was just a mere person, though he was an MP.
But is this then evidence of a much more deeper problem of a broken justice system rather than abuse of power?
Yes, it is a broken system and abuse of power. This is because when leaders enter into power or leaders take power, they take advantage as compared to the rest of Kenyans.
Gabriel, what are your thoughts on this?
Good morning, Trevor. Two things. First of all, I'll take cue from where Mheshimiwa has left, and I think he puts a very good line or a statement that the law must apply equally. If the law must apply equally, then the alleged or the people that alleged that the monies that were frozen or the accounts that were frozen that were belonging to the then MP for Madera, Rigathi Gachagua, who is now the deputy president, the allegations and what was pursued then by the criminal justice system should have actually come up with a very good and what I call a stable conviction. Anything else out of that will actually, many people will read political malice. And I think this is why now when it's coming, when things are starting to turn or things are starting to change, people are reading, you know, from different angles. What I call upon, Trevor, me and you are here when we saw the kind of disconnect that was between the office of the DPP and the DCI back then. So the DCI is they are the ones who alleged, and they investigated that the monies that were in the Deputy President Gachagua's account were proceeds of a crime, or they were, you know, it was deals that were not in line with articles of good governance. And so they were unable, and there's nowhere I've seen where they were able to strongly cement that allegation. And where do you go from there? You see, the work of the DPP, as we all know, is when he receives those files from the DCI, he has, you know, the capacity to investigate or to really look into the core matters of those files. And if they do not result to a conviction, then again he has the onus to go back to the DCI and tell them, you know, your investigations are shoddy. But can you imagine a situation whereby there's disconnect within between these two offices. What you get actually, and it's easy from what we've seen in the past, it's very easy to pass the cracks and angulate certain allegations into a political mantle. It is very easy. As a matter of fact, we saw it. And that is why you remember when the accounts were frozen. I remember very well that the MP back then, Gachagua, was very relaxed. And he was saying they will look whatever, they are free to do whatever they want to do. They are free to go as way back and do all the businesses and all the matters that I did. They are free to check all the accounts that belong to me and my, my family, if you will. And he was so sure and certain that they will come up with nothing. This was back then, when he was not even a deputy president. So I think we need to concur with this adage that if we are all equal to the eyes of the law, then I agree with Mheshimiwa, it must apply equally and evenly. And as much as we talk in matters governance, Trevor, we also need to be mindful that political machinations, if that is the bedrock of how you start your investigation, truth be said, the truth will come out one way or the other. I would have thought by now, given the machinery that the DCI had back then, they should have actually come with a very tangible conviction. I think they were unable to.
Yeah. But Okachu, what does this show to the Kenyans? Because then it means that the justice system can be rigged against or for you, depending on which side you're on.
Yeah. Indeed, that is the sad message, Trevor, that is being sent out day in, day out from our courts. And you've heard words from the magistrates handling these matters. And when they're even making their decisions, they actually, it's shameful. They actually say it's shameful for them to have been taken through all these processes, gobbling up Kenyan time and judicial resource in terms of time, which is very, very precious, and ending up with a non-starter, which in the first instance, even the prosecutors knew it was a non-starter. So it calls for the fact that we have to relook into also the systems that we have, first of all, and there is an essence of introducing maybe another chain or another angle whereby someone can review, apart from the DPP, now from the court itself, to review the preliminary evidence that is there before someone is even charged. And this can only happen because the DPP, there is already failure, and we now know we cannot put all our trust in the office of the public prosecutor, because he has already said there is a way that I can be influenced, and especially if the office remains the way it is. In America, you do not just take cases and courts deal with them and later on, after time has gone, realize that it's a waste of time. They actually look at it before. And that is why you saw even when the President Trump tried to raise issues at the point of the elections of Biden, they looked at it and it was dismissed. It didn't even have to be a petition. So you save a lot of court's time. But unfortunately, this should not be, because the design of our Constitution was designed in a way that we were to check and ensure that all the powers to protect from abuse in terms of the justice system are actually given to the DPP. And he was given everything. In fact, I was waiting to hear what is it that he didn't have, because he had security of tenure, he had security provided by the state. There is no reason as to why he should have, but it has happened. That means that as we speak now, people will say today, yes, it's Rigathi Gachagua and other big prominent people we have seen benefiting. But what about the other holoi polois who still, it's not a must that you are a big person to actually have cases instigated against you. So it means there are so many cases which are in our criminal justice system currently, but which were just machinated for one reason or another. So it means there's a need to first relook, evaluate, even on the cases that are there, because we have this tendency of saying we have so many cases, we have a major backlog, but if you look at those cases, majority of them, and I dare tell you almost 70% of the criminal cases that are taken actually end up being dismissed. Yet, that is, they don't achieve convictions. And that tells you a lot, because if you are going to have a point of sieving all the evidence, and remember, the office of the DPP, we replaced police prosecutors with now advocates of the High Court. So they have the capacity to look into all the investigations that come before them. They have the power to return those files with recommendations to fill gaps, so that by the time the office, anyone at the office of the DPP decides that this file is now proper for prosecution, chances should be very high, 80%, these will achieve a conviction. And the reason I say that is, for every case, for every DPP, that is public funds being utilized. But if you give the people the indication or the assertion that indeed this particular process is supposed to be, can actually be infiltrated and be misused, yeah, it means that at the point today, the president can tell us, okay, I will not use the criminal justice system for political purposes. But we should not wait for the goodwill of a president. In fact, we should not be told that. A president should always know that I can't. The position should be, it doesn't matter who ascends to presidency, who ascends to power, but there should be that limitation that I can, even if I wanted, the way the structures are, I can't.
Okay. Honorable Namoit, should the DPP resign?
Trevor, let me begin by saying that the justice system has already been wrapped by the executive. This is because if you look at the separation of powers, there's nothing called separation of powers in this country. Look at the way the parliament is behaving, the way the judiciary is behaving. They tend to lean towards the ruling executive. A case in hand is where we have a parliamentary system, presidential system in Kenya. But unfortunately, if you look at how the parliament performs, its role in parliament, the parliamentarians are being whipped by the executive to vote on behalf or in favor of the executive. Again, if you look at the judiciary, once the government is elected or a president comes into power, the judiciary tends to favor the executive. This is why we say that there is nothing called separation of powers. The executive is setting a bad precedent in this country because anything it does, it has to be supported by both the judiciary and parliament. Look at the case in hand of our deputy president. The EACC has done its part. The EACC staff have dedicated their time to see that this file is concluded and forwarded to DPP. Unfortunately, just because of influence of executive, the DPP now throws away the file. That's why I'm saying there is nothing called separation of powers. Calling the DPP to resign, I cannot say that DPP cannot pronounce that statement that DPP should resign. I don't have any ground to ask the DPP to resign.
Even though there are some cases that seems to have gone south in that he's the one who recommends that they should be prosecuted. So, and some of them are now being withdrawn and they're falling flat on their faces. Hasn't he failed in his role?
Yeah, this information need to be forwarded or need to be forwarded to the right institutions so that we can push the DPP to resign. We don't have this information, Trevor.
Okay. Gabriel, what are your thoughts? Should we get to a point where people take responsibility for
Of course. And I think, Trevor, that should be the bottom line. Everybody takes responsibility. I give a case, and this is the example that I find best suited, even for the discussion that we are having this morning. You remember the Chicken Gate, a scandal that, took place in this country. Before you say cut and a half, people served in the UK, they were arrested, investigations were done, people served prison time. They finished their terms, they were set free. Whereas on our end, same, what you'd call same protocols really, probably they shared a lot of information with the authorities, you know, in the UK. And I may also say probably they depended again on probably the same witnesses. But look at what happened in our case. This is the time we are starting to take people to court. So again, you go back to the adage of people taking responsibility, and justice delayed is justice denied. But again, from what Heshimo is saying, I think at some point we have to you know, look at this whole thing in its entirety. When you say the executive and the judiciary and the legislature, they've gone, all of them are in bed together. Yes, we talk about the independence, but then there is deep co-collaboration between those arms of government. It has to be there. At one point, they must talk with each other. That is how government is run. Well, I think what he's referring to, it's this independence where you don't want to know what is happening on that other side of, you know, that arm. But I think that is not, that's not the way to go. In fact, they cannot run, you know, as a divided house. At some point, there has to be serious collaboration between, you know, within those three arms of government. And by the way, that's how the laws are made. They must pass from one arm to the other, and you know, and as we all know, the process of lawmaking and the way we've now centered this thing of having these independent arms, again, like the judiciary, to be totally independent as far as finances are concerned and budgeting, which I feel is actually one of the biggest steps that we've ever made as a country, to allow institutions such as the police service to be able to run their own affairs as far as budgeting and far as finances and resources are concerned. Back in the day, it was very easy to arm twist, you know, the judiciary. It was very easy to arm twist the police, and we saw them being taken, you know, being misused. And I think from where the president is seated, I think that is something, and I remember, that is something which I think was in his back mind that he knew was the first thing he was going to change. And that is why after taking the reins of power, those are some of the things that he put in place. So to ensure that somebody does not wake up in the morning and start, you know, telling Trevor, who is probably a magistrate somewhere, you know, I know you need this budget to do ABC, but you must pass certain things my way, failure to which, then this budget, I'm going to hold it until you do what I want to do. So I think giving financial autonomy is a foot in the right direction. That in itself, to me, I think it's one of the biggest getters that this administration has been able to do. Coming to the issue, which I think this of the deputy president and these cases that have, and his funding that has been unfrozen and given back to him. You know, I was really following the case, and anybody who followed the case may have started, you know, looking at the shaky ground when the investigating officer, I think it was Frederick Musyoki, when he said they took the file from DCI, who had purported that the finances that were frozen through APA were actually proceeds of corruption. And he himself said they spoke to all the 6 government agencies, and all of them returned in writing that nobody was complaining that the work that was given to these companies were done, and there was no claim whatsoever. So you start wondering, when did it become, when was it investigated, who investigated, and came up with this allegation that the money that Deputy President Gachagua had in his account were proceeds of a crime? And why did it stop there? Yeah? Because back then, like they were not in power yet. So it was easy to fast track all these things and come up with a very tangible conviction. And like my good friend is saying, some of these things really do not need to take time. You need to come up with a very proper investigative or a file that is well documented, how monies went, and give it to the DPP. Any self-respecting officer from the office of the DPP then will see whether it will sustain a conviction or not. But if it's something that has been garnered through political machination, like I'm telling you, Trevor, truth has a way of coming out. And soon before you know it, you'll start seeing cracks. You'll be calling an agency, which somebody is saying corruption happened, and this agency are writing back letters and they tell you, no, we finished well, the contracts, the terms of the contract were all adhered to, and the service is already, has already commenced. We are giving people service and what have you. And if you are really holding on shaky ground, then you've actually put the DPP in very bad light, because all Kenyans probably are looking into is the DPP has been compromised. Yet when he looked at the file that was presented to him from the DCI, it did not make any sense. So he has a responsibility to actually ensure the government does not continue throwing money into a black hole.
Okay. I'm about to take a quick break here, but I'd like to hear what you think, Okach. There's a question here from Vincent. He's posing it to Muduma, but I'd like you to all chime in. He's saying, ask Mr. Muduma, what about the judge who gave the order for freezing of the account? Was there evidence that he or she based it on? So what happens to a judge who gives an order that then is later on overturned? And are they basing their orders on evidence, which evidence now seems to have disappeared?
Good question, Trevor. And this is what I say when APA writes and they purport. This is a government agency. When they purport, and you can do this, we've seen somebody running to court to hold a process and say, no, Trevor cannot continue doing this. We need it halted so that it can be investigated. The money was frozen, all right, but on what? It was an allegation, so that the case can be built. And so many judges, and he'll tell you, so many judges have actually given orders to freeze accounts. But does that mean that an illegality has taken place? No. And this happens throughout the country. So you have people who purport that there was an illegality here. And the first step to remedy the situation is to freeze accounts, or to ensure the same way somebody can be told to deposit their passports in court for fear of flight. But the truth of the matter is the investigating officer or somebody who has arrested that culprit just wants to ensure that everything remains even, so that they can pursue the case, or they can continue collecting evidence. Okay. So it does not mean that there's any illegality. We've seen this happen. Okay. Judges issue such orders. But remember, the alleging person is the one now to prove. Okay. So yes, the judge can issue an order, same way you have judges issuing restraining orders, so that something else can happen. An investigation can be carried on.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think what my Muduma is not actually appreciating is the fact that this was not just a freezing order. This was an order to forfeit. Actually, this money, forfeiting means you've already given it to the state. Yeah. So it's not your money. That's where the problem comes in, because at this particular point, and with the lack of evidence that ARA admits in front of the Court of Appeal, they still managed to convince a judicial officer that this money belonging to someone should be forfeited to us.
So how did that happen?
That is how sad the situation is. And all I will say is because of they hyped it, they actually indicated that they've done proper investigations. Remember, the DPP has also looked at the file and is convinced that indeed crimes or economic crimes did happen. So by the time this file lands before a judicial officer, and with all these indications, a judicial officer may be minded to agree with them. However, the problem is with the law that we have. The law that we have is also structured in a manner that in terms of these economic crimes, you are guilty until you prove yourself innocent. Because they say it is you to demonstrate where each and every shilling came from. And this is a point where you've just been ambushed. You have not been given time to actually assess and put your documents together. But at the end of the day, you are told that if you don't do that, automatically this money go to the state. So to that extent, it tells you that in terms of, that's why I'm saying we need to relook at a lot of things if we are to ensure that no one can tomorrow use this particular system to still infringe on other people's rights. Judges have the right, there is that possibility of a judge or a judicial officer making a mistake, or maybe being led to make a mistake pursuant to what was even there. Some things may even be fraudulently brought before the court, like the Supreme Court had told us, and it's not automatic that they have all the equipments to know that this is not proper, this is not accurate. However, that is why there is an appeal mechanism, whereby if you feel dissatisfied or you feel this judge may have erred in one way or another, you have now the right to go to a superior court, and they can relook at that and maybe correct, like now it has been corrected at this point. But I do wonder if indeed the current administration was not in place, if maybe we had an extension of the previous administration through the Azimio wing, if they actually won. My feeling is that even this ARA itself will not have gone to court today or yesterday and admitted that indeed we were wrong. They would have still continued with that persecution. And that it goes to the question you asked, Modoma. And it's so sad that, and I've not read this decision yesterday, but I would expect from that decision, one, the costs that have been awarded to Rigathi Gachagua and even his advocates, someone should pay, not the state, because now it is you and me who will pay those costs. Right. They have not spoken about that. I would have also expected an advisory out down there in terms of how do we correct this. I would have expected a tongue lashing on the ARA officers who actually perpetrated this. And that's what I'm saying, as we sit today, these same officers can be used to do the same thing, because eventually they go scot-free. So someone at the office of the DPP should take blame on this. Someone in terms of ARA should take blame in this. Without that, then we are not correcting anything. We are still at the same point, and that's why Kenyans will still tell you that we still don't believe that even this decision is not politically influenced, because it's the same characters who were used to. Yesterday we were complaining about them, today we are glorifying them and shaking hands that you've come to court and you've admitted that indeed this money was mine. But these are the same people who would have been prosecuting you if the regime did not change. No. We have not changed anything. All right, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we now talk about matters politics or even taxes or politics, depending on how you look at it. My guests are still with me here. Keep your views coming at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. See you in just a bit.